We've got a great crowd. So this is nice to see new folks. Barbara Pierce, our former mayor, is here with us. So we'll get started here. So welcome everyone. This is our, it's already March. So it's already been a year since this COVID has happened. So this is our March meeting of the Farm Hill Neighborhood Association. And I welcome everyone who's new and everyone who's been with us before. Our first up on the agenda tonight is Lieutenant Ed Conover with the Redwood City Police Department, and he's going to talk to us about the crime and what just happened.
I don't know. I still hear you.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I don't know what my whole screen just went. So I will just keep going. So he's going to talk to us about the increasing crime in our neighborhood and what the Redwood City Police Department is doing to combat that crime. Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, perfect. So I thought I'd start with just some year-to-year stats, and we'll just compare 2019 with 2020, seeing we just closed out 2020, or not too long ago anyway. And some things were, so first off, when we look at car thefts, that's definitely up. We had, and these numbers are for what we call the 7 and 8 beat, which it's not exactly a match to your neighborhood boundaries, but it's as close as I can easily get. And it gives you a general idea of that area. In 2019, we had 24 cars reported stolen, and we had 36 in 2020. So that's definitely a significant increase. I suppose on the good side, and I wish we could take credit for this, but we can't. And when we look at traffic collisions, both injury and non-injury, as well as hit and runs, they're down significantly. And I think that has way more to do with the pandemic restrictions than anything we're doing. We look at robberies, just to make sure we're talking about the same terms. Robbery, we're talking about a person taking the personal property of another person from them. So if someone comes into your house when you're not there, that's not a robbery, it's a burglary. Robberies were flat. DUIs were down. And again, I'm gonna probably just attribute that to the fact that we just had far fewer people traveling the roadways. I think some good news, to be honest with you, in your neighborhood has to do with assaults, both non-domestic violence and domestic violence. And one of the really heartbreaking things that we've seen with the lockdowns has been an increase in domestic violence. But in your area, we actually saw a decrease in that, which is good on you guys for keeping it together through a really, really rough time. As far as just generalized theft, it was essentially flat. Where we're seeing the real increase has to do with the stolen cars and then the burglaries, both the occupied and then non-occupied. I think, to be honest, the occupied burglaries surprised me a bit because so many people are home that it would seem that the targets of opportunity are fewer. And so I don't actually have a really good explanation for that. As far as the unoccupied, so much of that has to do with like catalytic converter thefts, bicycle thefts, things of that nature. So as I mentioned in the last meeting, I'll repeat it. There was a string through your neighborhood during the power outages of burglaries where they're taking advantage of that, and that turned out to be a crew that was working along the whole 280 corridor. And so our detectives collaborated with other local agencies, and were able to close almost all of those cases up in your neighborhood. We had one person in custody who's no longer in custody, but with court dates pending, and then warrants out for others. And as I said before, I mean, we've all had to adapt in so many different ways with this pandemic. And the courts are no exception. They've had to figure out how do you have court proceedings which are in person without endangering people's health. And what that has meant is that there's a very large backlog within the court system right now. And so a lot of cases are taking a long time to come to trial. And so we are seeing a lot of repeat offenders, which can be a little frustrating. But I mean, at the end of the day, we're all dealing with a once a century type of situation, hopefully just once a century. As far as the catalytic converter thefts, those, I think we have two factors working against us right now. One is that precious metals are very, very high. The three things they're looking for, the catalytic converters, are the palladium, the platinum, and the rhodium. And shoot, rhodium is going at $16,000 an ounce right now on the spot market. So very valuable. A few things that I can recommend. First off, the vehicles they're looking for generally are a little higher off the ground. The exception to that would be the Priuses. People with Priuses are getting just massacred with this thing. So if you can garage it, obviously that's going to be helpful. Park it in a well-lit spot if you can't. Some would argue that you can weld the catalytic, you can have someone weld the catalytic converter to the frame, and that will keep them from just unbolting it, because it takes about a minute for them to get that off if they know what they're doing. If it's bolted to the frame, that'll slow them down, but it won't stop them if they have like a reciprocating saw. The advantage of reciprocating saw for us is that it makes noise. So if you hear something weird like a reciprocating saw, call us immediately. The other thing to do too is engraving the VIN number of your vehicle on the catalytic converter itself, because we really have a demand problem with this type of crime, in that the demand for the precious metals inside that is so strong. But there are people who are unscrupulous about actually the scrap yards and such, which are selling or paying money for these catalytic converters of unknown origin. And so what we're doing as a police department is we're working, there is a Bay Area consortium of that works with, well, across the Bay with all law enforcement agencies, and also the agencies that are in charge of monitoring the scrap yards and the metal yards. And if we have a VIN on that catalytic converter, because when they take that in, they have to get good ID, they have to mail them a check. All of these things are stipulated in the law. But if we're just looking at some random catalytic converter and we're not able to connect it to a person, then we're really kind of out of luck. But if we've got the VIN number of the vehicle engraved on that, then obviously we run the VIN, and then we'll be able to trace it right back to the owner, and then we're able to make cases. And then there are also penalties for scrapyards that don't adhere to those regulations. So it's a little bit of a challenge, and it does go up and down. It's very cyclical. As soon as metal prices drop, it's going to stop, and then it'll pop up again. And so that's kind of going it's a tough one because it comes and goes. I can't recommend any specific products, but I can say I'll tell you this, an internet search will reveal a variety of options that run about $160, $170, that make it much more difficult for the thieves to get the cat off your vehicle. So that would be something that if you have a vehicle that you have to keep outside, or or something like a Honda Element, a Toyota Tacoma, and Prii, I guess, is that the plural for Prius? So keep those, if you're gonna, you can look at other ways of securing, because it's a major hassle. And in fact, a good friend of mine had his taken off his Prius twice, and the insurance company paid out the first time, but then refused to claim the second time. But it's going to run you like $2,000. It's unreal to get another one, and a tremendous hassle. So that's it with the stats and kind of where we're going and what we're attempting to do with the crime. That's kind of the two areas of crime that are up, on the uptick. I guess one thing I would say, if we're trying to make lemonade here, is when we look at violent crime, that's down. And I think for a lot of us, this whole pandemic, because most of the people I know have had someone who's been severely affected with it. In my personal family, we lost a loved one to it, and we've all been. I think it's helped to sort of refine what's important. And so when I look at that drop in violent crime, that feels good somehow. It seems important.
It is important, and I'm so glad to hear that our domestic violence rates are down. And my sincere condolences on the loss of your family member, loved one who you lost to the coronavirus. It's a terrible thing to lose a loved one, and we certainly send our
Thank you, John. I appreciate that.
I'd like to open it up to our neighbors if they have any questions for Lieutenant Conover. There's any, we'll see if anybody wants to raise their hand or.
Looks like Michelle's got her hand up.
Yes, Lieutenant, I was wondering if you could comment on the bicycle thefts as far as, do you know who is taking the bicycles and what they're doing with them? And are they people that are in local or out of town or things like that?
Yeah, great. It's a great question, Michelle. Thank you. So the bicycle thefts, man, we've been working that hard, and we had a theft, actually a really brazen theft a few days ago, where the owner of the bicycle literally had taken one bike down, put it on the rack, went back upstairs to get the second bike, and someone had come in and taken the bike in that minute and a half interim. We did have some suspect info on that, and we're able to track down the vehicle. The detectives were actually out sitting on that. It was outside a hotel this morning. They were able to contact a person who did not match the suspect description, but they're working the leads. But that's more anecdotal. I think to answer your question, a lot of people are stealing a lot of bicycles. And I'm not 100% sure of the driver with that in terms of why it's such a commodity. I think that things that really help us would be, because people will buy the bikes, record that serial number, just take a photo with your phone and keep that somewhere, because we're able to enter that in the database. And it is sometimes frustrating when we'll come across someone with 4, 5, 6 bikes that certainly a reasonable and prudent person could suspect were not obtained in a legal manner, and yet when we run the serial numbers, none of them come back as being reported stolen. And so I think that Joanna, and I don't know if you were in on the conversation, Michelle, when Joanna and I were talking just before the meeting began, but there's so many factors that are sort of pushing in on us that we don't really have a lot of control of as the police department and as a community that we're part of. But I try to control what we can control, and what we can do together here is have that serial number handy, so that when it's reported stolen, we're able to enter that in the database, and it gives us a better chance of recovery, and if nothing else, of holding someone accountable for the theft, or at least the possession of the stolen property.
Thank you, Michelle. Does anyone else have any questions for Lieutenant Conover?
Yeah, I have it. So I have a question around the thefts, break-ins that were going up and down the 280 corridor. You said you were working with other police departments. Is there a theme that we should be aware of? Is there time of day that we need to be more vigilant around? Those things that we may be able to kind of help our neighbors out to see if there's anything that's amiss in the community.
Yeah, Leslie, thanks for the question. I think so that particular string, yes, had some very definite themes. They were midday. They were all entry through the backyard, generally through a slider. They simply break the slider or find it ajar. They were also taking advantage of the rolling power outages, because they were aware that that many people now have security systems, ring and fill in the blank, and they were waiting for when the power was out. That's when they were hitting. We haven't seen that repeated, and part of that may have to do with the arrest and then the pending warrants on others. But I think in general, one of the advantages that you guys have is that you're a tight community, a tight neighborhood, and it really comes down to being aware of what's going on, and not, if you see something that's suspicious, give us a call, because then we can respond out. I would love to be able to put some sort of data analytics on this and come up with some very, very specific things, but they're a little more random than that. So but the best you can do is look out for your neighbors, and then also make sure that it's fairly clear that the house is occupied at the time, and that generally the difference between just a regular, the burglars are really looking for an unoccupied house, and that would be the best way. And then if you do have some sort of video monitoring, be it a Ring or any of the other products that are available, just making sure you know how to access that makes a real big difference for us. And in fact, a few times where we've caught the burglars in progress, it's because the owner of the house actually wasn't there, but they were monitoring it from their cell phone or their desktop at work or what have you. So just being dialed in on that system really helps us work together to hold people to account for the activity.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
Thank you so much. Oh, Jerry, go ahead.
Just a quick question. Are many of the burglaries done by actually breaking in, or are they more windows and doors ajar, that kind of thing? I'm always concerned about, sliding glass doors, that kind of thing.
Yeah, Jerry, good question. It varies, and it kind of depends on the individuals doing it. Some will want to be kind of quiet and stealthy, and quite frankly, the sliders, because of the safety glass, they don't make a ton of noise, and so they're fairly comfortable going in through those as well. But I guess the answer to that is it's both. One thing you can that actually does. Remember, a lot of this when we're talking about crime prevention, whether it's the catalytic converter thefts or burglaries, is making it, the old saying, like if two guys are walking in the woods and they're like, well, you can't outrun a bear. It's like, I don't have to outrun a bear. I just got to run faster than you, right? If you just make it a little more difficult, unless it's Fort Knox, you're not going to make your house impregnable. But a really good solution is to put locks on your outside gates, so that they can't just reach over and open it up. They either have to hop the fence, or more than likely, they're just going to move on to a softer target.
Thanks.
You're welcome, Jerry.
All right, thank you so much. Well, we're at time there, Lieutenant Conover, so I appreciate you coming, and we all wish you well and continued good health and safety, and we appreciate you being here this evening. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joanna. And just to all the people on the meeting, Joanna has all my contact information, my cell phone and my email. So if any of you have further questions you'd like to discuss at length or another issue, please feel free to reach out to me.
All right, thank you so much for being
Thanks
here.
so much. Have a good evening.
All right, good night.
Good night.
All right, so next up is going to be our brand new Equity and Inclusion Officer, Briana Evans. I have had the good fortune of meeting her and hearing her speak in another forum, and I am really excited to introduce her to you all tonight. Briana.
Hi there. I'm Briana Evans. Good to meet you all. Thank you so much for the invitation to join you here tonight. Joanna asked if I would share a little bit about my background as I'm coming into this role and about what's going on in Redwood City relative to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'll keep it brief about me. Please feel welcome to jump in with questions if you have them. My background is in public service, in community engagement and empowerment, and in training and facilitation. So I'm coming into this with experience and a lens that is really focused on changing how things are operating from the inside outside. When we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, often we're really focused on how we're experiencing services on the outside of an organization, which is very important and the ultimate aim. And to make lasting change, we have to start on the inside and make sure that folks understand why we're making the changes we're making. So that is a lot of my focus up front, really on supporting staff inside of Redwood City to understand what equity, inclusion, diversity mean, and how we can prioritize them in our work. In terms of changes that you'll see coming up, there is not going to be a ton immediately that is visible from the outside. There will be some departmental projects that will result in some visible changes. Those are in the works in the moment. So I'll be able to share more about those probably by the end of the month. Aside from that, a lot of the tangible changes that you're likely thinking of would be the result of policy from council. So advocating with city council is still the best way to make change. The city council is convening an equity and social justice subcommittee. I expect they'll be voting on that on Monday. So we'll hear back on that as of Monday. But I anticipate working with that subcommittee to establish some policy priorities that would then unfold over the upcoming year or so. So with that brief introduction, please let me know, what questions do you have? What are you wondering?
Thank you so much. We're so happy to have you here. Does anyone have a question right off the bat for Briana? If not, I can go into some questions. We have a lot of people here tonight, so I'm really excited. I don't see any hands up right now, but if I'm missing someone, you can please just unmute yourself and begin to speak. So, Briana, could you explain what the equity plan is? I know we've heard a lot about it with your introduction, and the city's been posting quite a bit about it, but what is an equity plan, and what is the equity plan for Redwood City? What will that look like? What is that about?
Mhm. So equity plans can look different in different cities or jurisdictions. The purpose of an equity plan is really to focus on fairness. So one of the key ideas behind the work that I'm doing is this concept of equity, which is essentially the idea that everyone deserves a fair chance. So all of us should get what we need to have a fair start at success. One of the strategies for fairness that we often encounter, perhaps particularly if we have siblings, we're used to the idea of equality. Everybody should get the same thing. But the fact is, we're not all starting out at the same place. It can be hard to see some of the path that another person has walked or why things might be different for them. But when we look into data, when we look across big populations, we can see that some groups are consistently at a disadvantage relative to other groups. So the purpose of developing an equity plan is making sure that across Redwood City, people are getting a fair start and that they have the opportunity to succeed in the long term. That didn't fully answer your question though. You're asking what's in it, right?
Yes.
Yes. So there is a lot to consider about what goes inside of it. So I'm going to name that right now, I'm working on an internal plan that's focused over the next 18 months. That's a lot about the capacity building that I was just talking about inside of the organization. How do we support people to get on the same page, particularly during a pandemic when everyone is stretched very thin? How do we get on the same page about what equity is and how we would prioritize it in our work? There will be, as I mentioned, some service changes that come about as a result of that, but a lot of the larger shifts that we might see would come after that 18 months or come later on in the fiscal year.
Thank you. Has there been anything specifically since you've joined on with Redwood City that you were either excited to see or maybe thought that there was an area that needed some extra attention? Can you sort of explain in your background when you came, what was the feeling and how do you perceive, how are we doing? What's our status? How are we doing right now?
I think that is also a very popular question that folks have both inside of the city and from residents. What's our score? What grade do we get? So the fact of the matter is it's hard to give a grade because every jurisdiction has different conditions that they're looking at. One thing I will say that was impressive as I was coming into Redwood City is the amount of leadership, dedication, and commitment to this work. Not everyone is on the same page exactly about how we do it, but from long before I started, the leaders in Redwood City were interested in advancing equity, interested in making shifts that support every resident and having what they need to succeed, and eager to start doing the work. I'd say that's not the case in every jurisdiction, and I'm really fortunate to be working with colleagues that from the first day when I asked, what is it that you're prepared to do, had answers and were ready to start making plans.
Well, that's wonderful news. I'm so glad to hear that. So does anybody we have 5 minutes left with Briana, and I really want to make the most of this time. Does anyone have some questions?
I think Gail has her hand up.
I just have a quick question about salaries for city staff. Might you be looking at, for instance, job categories and what women make versus male colleagues?
Yes. So this is a big comprehensive, there are a lot of pieces to this role and salary reviews are part of it. That is something that the Human Resources Department already does. And as we continue over this year to look at job categories and understand if folks are, if they're in the right role for the work that they're doing, we'll also be looking at salaries.
That was an excellent question. Thank you, Gail. Does anybody else have a question for Briana? Well, right now, our Farm Hill Neighborhood Association is actually working on a petition that has to do with the Magical Bridge Playground. And I used to live on Volota Road. That's actually the first home that my husband and I bought. We lived on Volota Road, right in that block. And I'm hearing from a lot of residents who live on the northern side of Jefferson, or anyone who has to cross in that Jefferson-Volota intersection, especially if you are a multi-generational family or someone with disabilities. It takes a little longer to get across the street with the kids, that it's dangerous. And if you don't have a car and you can't drive there, or in a lot of our multi-generational families, grandma doesn't drive. My grandmother never drove. So I see that as an equity issue. And so what are your thoughts about that? How we can how we can bridge that gap?
I wonder if my sound just cut out for a moment. I didn't quite catch. So is it that people are having trouble getting into the Magical Bridge Playground?
Right. So
because of traffic.
Because the traffic is so dangerous, and they have younger children, or they're older, and so it takes a little bit of time, and so they're not necessarily using it the same as someone who doesn't have those same obstacles.
Yeah, that's a good question. That I imagine there are probably a few factors to consider there, since it's the traffic outside of the playground that is preventing people from being able to cross the street and get there. I will bring that up to Chris Beth in Parks and follow up about what might be happening if he's already aware of that situation and what factors might be influencing it.
That would be great, because that playground, the whole intention of it was inclusion and equity, and it's a beautiful playground. So we want to make sure we can get as many people there safely as we possibly can.
Absolutely.
All right, so I promised that I would get you out on time, and if does anybody have any questions? I don't see any hands. Thank you so much. Rob.
I had a question. Yeah. I had a question just as far as how the city's approaches to equity also will extend to like the adjacent unincorporated county regions and kind of our neighbors just over the county line, working with the city as well.
North Fair Oaks is always part of the consideration about how we consider equity in Redwood City. I think for me personally, I was surprised to learn about the history of North Fair Oaks years ago, about the ways that that area was excluded from being in a city specifically. So that's certainly a consideration right from the start for us. I will say also that the County of San Mateo has also hired an equity officer. The county equity officer is coming from public health. She is fantastic, Shireen Malik Afzali. And she will also have some work to do in considering how to support North Fair Oaks. She has been deeply involved in the Community Collaborative for Children's Success, which has highlighted needs in North Fair Oaks and been working to support that area as well. So definitely a consideration within the Redwood City government, but also in our county government as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Rob. It's nice to have you back. All right, well, thank you so much, Briana. I appreciate you being with us here tonight. I look forward to working with you. We have tremendous faith in your ability to really make a difference here in Redwood City. So thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you. Looking forward to working with you all.
All right, so next up on our agenda tonight is Chris is going to talk about, Chris is a member, Chris Rasmussen, my husband, and he's a member of the San Mateo County Mental Health and Substance Abuse Recovery Commission. And so he's going to talk about some of the current programs and services that his commission is working on.
Good evening, can you hear me? Yes, good. Yeah. All right. Cool. Hey, everybody. Good to see you guys all. So part of our commission work, we've been working on a lot of different initiatives in the last year. I'll just run through them real quick. One of them is our Youth SOS team. And part of the Mental Health Service Act money that we get every year from taxes over $1 million, we come up with 3-year plans to put into works what kind of goals and initiatives that we want to look at. And that's done by a whole steering committee. And when I took over the Youth and Children Committee over a year ago now, my first task was to create a youth crisis team to go out and respond to youth in crisis. And a lot of that was for the schools and for, to take law enforcement out of the picture, to the schools mostly. So as part of that plan, we've been working on a youth crisis team to decrease needs of psychiatric hospitalizations, emergency room visits, and law enforcement responses. So this was back in October 2019. We started working on this. And recently, the Family Urgent Response System, which is FERS, was established by Senate Bill 80 and Assembly Bill 79. It requires counties implement a mobile response team for foster youth and their caregivers. So what we were able to do is merge those two programs together and increase the funding with both of those two programs and put together the Youth SOS team. And SOS stands for Stabilization, Opportunity, and Support. It should be able to launch July 1st. And it's provided, the services are provided by Star Vista. If you're not familiar, they do most of the crisis services in the county. And it's going to incorporate trauma-informed, culturally responsive best practices to respond to youth from ages 0 to 21. And so we're really looking forward to that rolling out. It's a lot different than the pilot program you've been hearing with the Law Enforcement Mental Health Partnership. This is solely for youth from 0 to 21, although there may be some overlap once that other program gets up, but this is a countywide program and this is run through Star Vista. So we're hoping that, I'm hoping that a lot of it's gonna tail into the schools so they can call this crisis team instead of calling the police officers. The second thing, I'm gonna share my screen here. Can't get it to work. Hold on. Sorry, I had it right there. Where'd it go? There it is. That's not it. That is it. This is a worksheet that we put together for mental health emergencies. And so if you are in crisis, instead of calling 911, or when you call 911, these are some of the things you should look over and ask the police department and the dispatcher. So this is just a rough little pamphlet that we put together to make sure that you're getting the appropriate response, to make sure that the dispatcher is well aware of what services you're asking for, and just to be prepared and to know your rights as a consumer when you're calling for a mental health crisis. I'll put this link in the chat when I'm done, and you guys can download it. It's really good information. We're looking over this right now. If you're not aware, we formed an ad hoc committee to work with the community wellness program, the pilot program, the mental health and police partnership that was been done. And we've been doing a lot of work in the last couple of weeks with that. And so this is part of what we're doing with that. We're also working on trying to get a countywide crisis hotline, so an alternative to 911. So some counties have it, some places have it. So we're trying to remove that from the system. That is it. Let me stop sharing. All right, perfect. The next thing that we just worked on real quickly is our Housing Initiative Task Force. So one of the priorities our commission has is housing for mental illness patients. And so we had our first mental health housing task force. And so we're looking at identifying gaps in services based on proposed housing continuums and housing support services, defining and prioritizing the outcomes, and developing and prioritizing housing strategies for future funding consideration. Some of the details with MHSA, the money that we have in this 3-year cycle, we're planning on getting more money. So we have more money than we expected. So we put together this housing task force as part of the commission's priority to work on more housing and what we can do in the realm of putting this money towards housing for people with mental illness. And I think that's it.
I'd also like to point out that it's my understanding that more than 50% of the folks who are in our county jails and in over 80% in our juvenile jail, our juvenile facilities have mental illness. So this is a significant issue when we talk about criminal justice reform, when we talk about making sure that people have the services that they need. These overlap and they impact every aspect of somebody's life, maybe substance abuse, they all intersect. And so the fact that they're really working on these housing programs, that gives me a lot of hope that they really are looking at the full scope of the problem. So does anybody have any questions relating to any of this information that Chris just shared? Sonia.
Hi there. I'm so grateful for this presentation and for your two presenters so far. By the way, this is outstanding. I wish it'd be great if St. Carlos did something like that, which is where I live. I wanted to really appreciate the mental health component that's being brought in, equity. Regarding the mental health, is there a number, 911 is the emergency line. Is there I hear you talk about a hotline, but is there a 711 or an 8? Are there any of the 11s left over that we can use for a mental health crisis, that we could do the same kind of push with emergency that we did with you know what I mean, that we could transfer? Because it's a lot of numbers to remember. 7 when you're in a crisis, or when someone else is in a crisis, or I can't even remember the non-emergency sheriff hotline. My brain just goes blank. So anyway, just wondered.
Yes, no, there's not. And that's one of the big things that I'm trying to spearhead on the commission, is getting a countywide alternative to 911, a 3-digit alternative to 911 for mental health crises. Right now, Star Vista is our primary crisis contractor. So they have numbers, they're 800 numbers. We have suicide prevention numbers. Last January, when we set our priorities as a commission, one of our priorities was more accessible front door services. Because if you've ever tried to go on San Mateo County Mental Health and find someone to contact, it's very hard. So it's not a very welcoming front door for services. And so you don't know if it's a child crisis, adult crisis, suicide crisis. It's impossible to navigate. So that's one of our priorities as well, is to make a better front door for services, or at least a one-stop service where one number to call, where that person can put you in the right place where you need to be. And then the other thing that I'm working on is countywide 911 alternative to 911.
Thank you, Sonia. Does anyone else have any questions for Chris as it relates to mental health services, substance abuse, homelessness, policing? All right, so I guess that means I'm up. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. So I am a commissioner on the San Mateo County Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Commission, which is a really long name, which means that we do oversight for our youth who are at risk of entering the juvenile justice system here in San Mateo County, or are already in the system in some capacity. May they be on probation, on diversion, or actually incarcerated up at the Youth Services Center. I was recently sworn in just in January, so I'm very new to the commission. And I joined at a really exciting time. The state of California is going through a complete realignment of juvenile justice. The whole system is changing. So in California, traditionally in the past, when a child would commit a crime that was, it could be even classified as a misdemeanor, quite frankly, but however the juvenile judge chose to adjudicate that crime, if it was a crime that was serious and that the judge felt was serious enough to confine for over a year, they would send our youth to basically a juvenile prison. In California, there was one juvenile prison for females, and that was at the California Youth Authority in Ventura County. So no matter where the female came from, they would be sent to Ventura County and incarcerated in that facility. For males, we had 4 or 5 facilities. The closest one to us was Stockton. The system over the years had so many continuing issues. There was investigation after investigation. Children were getting injured. And so the state of California decided that the system had basically failed. And so now any child who commits a crime, youth who commits a crime, will now be held locally. We are no longer going to send our children out. We will keep them regardless if they have committed a homicide or if they have committed a shoplifting offense. So we are in the process right now of restructuring our entire system. So that's big news for us. Last year, we have a very active commission. We work on several projects each year. We issue a report every year. I will go ahead and Chris will, he put some links in the chat for you. One of the big accomplishments we had last year, I'm gonna see if I can share my screen here and show you. Can you see my screen? Mm-hmm. Okay, so this was a handbook that we came up with. And it's a handbook we have in both English and Spanish, and it's how to help your child after an arrest. And prior to this, there really was no guidance for parents. If you found yourself in a situation getting a call that your child had either been arrested or arrested and brought to the juvenile detention facility, you really didn't know how to navigate that. So we created this handbook that is available on our website, and Chris will put the link for that in the chat as well. And this helps parents know how to get services, what the system looks like, what your rights are, what your child's rights are, what to expect, and how the process goes. So this was well received throughout the entire state. We're getting calls from many different agencies asking us for guidance on this. This was sort of a groundbreaking thing that we provided here. Let me go back out and see. Stop sharing my screen. Let's see. Stop share. Okay, there we go. So so we are going through a lot of exciting changes here, and we anticipate that our facilities up at off of 280 there are going to be completely restructured, and we're going to have new programming, and we've got some funding coming in, and this will all begin in June, this summer actually. So we will no longer be sending any children to the state facility, and we will be handling things locally. So that is what is happening on my commission. And does anyone have any questions about the juvenile justice system or what's happening either on a state level or locally? Gail.
Thank you. So I'm not quite sure how to say this question, but I heard some information about foster youth who are basically at 18 thrown out of the system, and they have a lot of problems with homelessness. Are you working with that aspect at all?
So I know that there are agencies that are working on that. I know that that's been an issue for decades, and I know that there has been some headway on that. That is not something that our commission currently works on, but a lot of our children that we see either have been in the foster care system at one point, so they do intersect at some level. The youth that we deal with, we deal with them up until the age of 23. So we can provide services, special education, whatever it is that they need. And we're basically rebuilding what that program is going to look like here. So we're really looking forward to hearing some community feedback on what you would like to see. What would you like to see your juvenile justice system look like?
I also know on the mental health front, they call them TAY, transitional age youth. There's a lot of services for foster kids and for transitional aged youth in the mental health system. So if they're connected with mental health, there's a ton of services, including housing and stuff like that.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? Jerry.
Yeah, you said that you incarcerate or help children up through the age of 23, and are they in the same population as younger?
I'm sorry, it cut off at the end. So are you saying, are they housed in the same facility as the younger children? Was that your question?
Yeah, you said you take care of kids that are up to, which are not, to me, they're not kids at 23, but are they in that same population and up by 280 there with the younger children?
So when a child commits a crime in the juvenile system, the crime has to have been committed prior to their 18th birthday to qualify to be under the juvenile court, which we oversee that. That's part of our work. But a child can be 17 years old and commit a very serious offense that has a 4 or 5 year sentence, and we keep them in the juvenile system rather than sending them to the adult state system. We keep them with us through that. So if you committed a crime at the age of 23, you wouldn't be, necessarily in our system. But if you committed the crime prior to your 18th birthday, and then you were aging up as you were serving your time, you would still stay within our system. And we do have different wings. So we keep our, right now there's only 10 children at the facility due to COVID. We're basically spending a few $1 million a child right now to incarcerate them. We do have different pre-COVID, the units. They're separated by the females. They're separated by whose case hasn't been adjudicated yet, if they haven't gone to court, and also on the sophistication of the crime. So we wouldn't necessarily put a 10-year-old child a 12-year-old child who's never been in the system with a more sophisticated youth who maybe has been in and out of the system for some time. Does anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, hi. You're on mute, but I have a question. Is what are you and the commission looking at for community support for this? Obviously, the changes that are going on, and what is there needs for the community to create an environment that is welcoming for the individuals. Sometimes people don't, it's like, no, not in my neighborhood, not next to me. They have the, this is a really great idea, but not anywhere close to me or my friends. And so what is the commission looking at is trying to set an environment that is going to be welcoming for these to so that they don't feel like they need to go back to crime or mischief.
That's a great question. So we view these children as our children. all the children in San Mateo, these are our children. Their success is dependent upon all of us. So we're looking more at a restorative justice model, more of an acceptance, and because they're so young, they have their whole lives in front of them. So we need, many of them come from trauma and abuse and many very complicated backgrounds. So what we are looking for is an acceptance on the restorative justice front, the buy-in of these are our children, and how can we together as a community give them the tools and the services needed to succeed. So the mistakes that they may have made as a juvenile, their brains aren't fully developed, there may be some significant issues. It means that you're still ours, we're still invested in you, we still want you to succeed. So does that answer your question, James?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other part is like, are there other like community programs that should be expanded to help them that kind of refocus their attention on other, you know, more productive matters. I think of kind of like gang task force that try to, you know, redirect the people that are in gangs to more productive, community-based projects, or even, you know, building confidence in the individuals so that they, you know, they don't feel like that they need to resort to crime to kind of make a name for themselves or you know, make themselves feel good. Just more like that, where, you know, are there programs or there parts of the community that are being looked at to help welcome them to the and be part of the overall acceptance, you know, are there you know, community cleanups, but also, you know, I'm just thinking like self-defense classes and just being, you know, more of building their confidence and being more engaged in the community.
All of those things are great ideas and great questions. So yes, we're looking at vocational training. We're looking to build a partnership with Project Change with the community colleges. We're looking to give them this, you know, the skills they need to, may it be apprenticeship programs, you know, different vocational. So we're looking at mentorships. Basically everything is on the table. And so this is what makes it such an exciting time to sort of build this. We're not certain now. I was working today to find out just how many youth we have in the system now that are being detained by the state and what their services are going to look like coming back. Those are going to be significant because they've already experienced the trauma of being in the juvenile prison. But going forward, I think we have the opportunity to change the whole outlook, the whole field, the whole purpose of rehabilitating our youth. And I think that at every opportunity, I will announce if there's an opportunity for the community to get involved. I know that as of right now, there are community members who do, like, they donate art supplies, they donate like yarn, all different things so the kids can actually do art therapy in the facility. So those are things that are happening right now. And I can go ahead and continue to share all that information on our Facebook page and as it comes about. But those are all things that we're looking at. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
All right, so if that is, if we're done with the questions there, we are going to go into our, to identify and outline our goals for the upcoming year. This was on our agenda for last month, but we ran short on time. And this is an important thing. This is one of the biggest purposes of our organization, is to get together and work on projects that really make a difference in our community. We have small projects that are going on all the time, may it be like the Magical Bridge Playground or saving the oak tree on Connecticut. I mean, we're always getting involved in little ways, but I really would like to see our organization work on something that makes a lasting difference in our community. And we are so lucky to have so many members who are involved in so many different organizations, have a variety of skills and gifts to bring to the table. So I would like to hear what the neighborhood would like to work on. What do you think what our greatest needs are? And what is something that you've been thinking about that you would like to see changed or worked on in our neighborhood? So just go ahead and unmute yourself if you want to talk.
So this is James again. Taking up all the time for everybody. Sorry. So I know that we've talked about this before, but really kind of the elderly population and how do we, especially in these times where they feel probably even more shut in than before, is how do we have maybe a reach out to them and have more of a community outreach to them, understand what their needs are and how we can support them. I know that there was this one woman that walked down our street that normally walked down with her husband, and we found out that her husband died a few months ago, and she was really distraught, and this was the first time that she got out of the house in a few months. And so things like that, knowing our neighbors and really being, showing our respect for them, but also trying to comfort them when they need it. And so, kind of building that neighborhood feel. I was wondering if that's something that we can focus on and really trying to be more, expand the idea of the neighborhood and be more of kind of what I remember growing up being, knowing your neighbors all the way down the street and having, block parties and everybody went to the baseball game that was the local baseball game, and those things is just kind of building the community and knowing your neighbors more.
I think that's wonderful, James. And I think that's exactly what we need to be doing, especially, our neighborhood is a really good mix of families and elderly. And I think we do have a responsibility to look out for each other. Remember when we had the blackouts and we were checking to see who needs to have ice for their medication, maybe their diabetic medication, or a lot of seniors are on it, even though they live in multi-million-dollar homes here, they're still on fixed incomes because they've been here a long time. And so if all of their food gets spoiled when there's a power outage, that really impacts them, and some of our neighbors who grew up in the Great Depression are not so quick to throw food away, and then that may cause health issues for them. So that's a significant issue. And I think we've got enough people on board that have the skills that we can sort of come up with a database and a neighborhood plan. And if we could sort of have ambassadors in each little pocket maybe, and we all step up to say, hey, I've got this pocket, this area, and then we all connect. We live in one of the most places with the smartest people on earth, basically, right? So we certainly could come up, right, Ben? We could come up with some technology to get that going. Ben's like our technology guy, so no. So, well, I'm sure we can come up with something, and I think that's desperately needed. So that's an excellent project. So Chris, can you put the email in the chat so we can see who wants to volunteer for that? And then we can sort of assign and work that going forward, and we can build that. I know that we have Gerd on the call, and Gerd is like our expert transportation and bike person. Every time I hear him speak about this, I think, oh my goodness, this is what our kids need in Farm Hill, especially because some neighborhoods don't have sidewalks. We have no sort of east-west transportation for our kids to get safely down to the movies. We have to drive them down there. The bus routes are infrequent, and we're hearing all the time that Samtrans is having to lay off because people can't afford housing and they can't fill the positions. So it's sort of like a domino effect. So I would also be interested in sort of forming a a subcommittee on that, if anyone else is interested in seeing how we could maybe get some really safe bike lanes. I don't feel that the ones we have right now are adequate by any means. I've seen some really creative ones. Is anybody interested in that? Does that resonate with anyone as far as being our second project to work on for the year? We wouldn't want to take on more than that because we'd want to put our full energy. If there's another project that someone would like to put forward, we can look at that as well.
I definitely wanted to look at the open spaces. I did like what you did with the fences around schools. So far, this was happening in low-income neighborhoods all the time. Schools are locked off, so kids can't use the playgrounds during the afternoons or on weekends. Now it has reached the affluent neighborhoods as well. So Roosevelt is closed off, Henry Ford is closed off. Now Roy Cloud will be closed off. They say it's just because of COVID, and it will change after COVID, but there is no after COVID. This virus isn't going away. We will have yearly or bi-yearly vaccinations. It's a come and go thing. Kids need to get out. Kids need to practice riding their bike. All my kids pretty much learned riding their bike on the blacktop because in our neighborhood here, there are no flat spots really.
Yeah.
You have to do it at Roy Cloud or at Roosevelt. There is really no other safe choice because most of our roads don't have bike lanes either. And the sidewalks are in bad shape, or if you look over Emerald Hills, they are not there at all. So the open spaces, that could be a nicer path along Hetch Hetchy, right?
Yes.
There could be better ways to get to our parks with safer bike lanes, buffered bike lanes. But these schoolyards need to be open because we just don't have enough spaces in the hills. Stuhlsaft isn't really, we can't practice biking at Stuhlsaft Park. That's great for hiking. So I'm all in.
Thank you, Gert. I appreciate that. And roller skating too.
Yes.
Like how many of us like backwards roller skating does Xana do? I mean, I'm older than some, but I mean, we would go to the school and it was flat and you could do all those moves and skateboard and all of that. So I see that Jennifer's hands up. Thank you so much, Gert.
Hi, thank you. Hi, I just wanted to say I think that's a really worthy project is the safe bike lanes. I have a 6-year-old daughter and, I'm noticing since we moved into the neighborhood, there isn't really a flat area for her and her friends to ride bikes. And so I do have, other neighborhood friends that do say, well, let's go to Roy Cloud because it's flat and it's safe. So I think that is really a worthy project for us to take on as a community. I think, thank you.
That's great. So I think that does anyone have any opposition to any of those projects? Well, I think we've just established our priorities for this year. Thank you so much. I'm excited to get working on that. Chris, I believe, has put the information on how to reach us in the chat. And so we can form those subcommittees. Who's ever got some time, whatever you can give when, we can really make a difference. And I appreciate that. So I'm excited about these priorities. Okay, so moving on now, I've got a couple of announcements. I'm going to see if I can share my screen. Let's see here, share my screen. My first announcement is, it was on the safety fencing, which is desktop. Safety fencing is right here. So I just, okay, there we go. Can you see my screen? No, okay, let's see. What did I do wrong here? Okay, share my screen. I'm learning. share my screen here. Can you see it now? Yes, it's a letter. So I just, for all transparency purposes and for the sake of accuracy, I wanted to point out that I sent a letter to Janet Lawson and Maria Slocum Diaz, because Maria's in charge of the Roosevelt School and Janet is in charge of Roy Cloud, or it's under their schools. So the questions I asked regarding the fencing was, why is the fencing going up? When is it going to be completed? How will it impact our residents who are currently using the playground, blacktop fields, and campuses for recreational use? Will the gates to fencing be locked during non-school hours, weekdays, weekends, during extended breaks and vacation? Will the fencing impact youth or local sports organizations from the ball fields? And if yes, if she could explain that, and who could I refer people to who were concerned about that? And how is the fencing being funded? And she got right back to me, which was very kind. She wasn't able to attend our meeting, but she wanted to address the concerns. And she basically said that this was funding that was established about a decade ago, and it's in response to, I'm going to put this in the chat so you can see it all verbatim, but for the sake of just speeding it up, as these are Measure T funds. These were funds that were dedicated prior to COVID. There's concerns about safety and school shooting and a bunch of controversial things. And she says that they will be opening them back up after COVID. So I just wanted to share that they were very responsive and we were getting a lot of questions. And so that was my announcement there. And now that that's going to be one of our projects moving forward, that's where that's what she provided me when through the email. So the next thing on my list is the request for a budget session. So can you see my screen? I'm moving quickly. I'm learning very fast. The Farm Hill Neighborhood Association put out a formal request to the city of Redwood City to ask for a public study session on the upcoming budget for 2021, 2022. And basically what we're asking for, the needs of our community are great. We have COVID. Traditionally, public safety has taken up more than about half of our budget. And the community, we've got wildfire risk. I know we were just looking at the possibility of having our fire department services cut back. They were saved last minute, but in this economic environment, we don't know what that means. There's also been calls for the community to sort of restructure our police services. And I know that the city of Oakland actually was on the news today that they're actually sending their paramedics out to mental health crisis calls. So basically the association put out a formal request asking, can we have a study session just prior to the proposed budget being passed, so we have an opportunity to look at where the money is being spent, because we have a reduced amount of money and we have a great amount of needs, and it's difficult to find that information unless you really know how to look for it. So this was one of our action items, and we did hear back from the mayor stating that she was going to look into a budget session prior to the one that's scheduled right now in June. And so that is, that's an announcement on that formal notification. Let's see what our next notification was. Okay, so some of you may have heard, unfortunately, that that there was a doctor, a pediatrician actually, in who works for Stanford, who the Redwood City Police, it was back in November. Here's, you can see there was a pediatrician who worked for Lucille Packard Children's Hospital who was arrested by our gang task force, I believe. And he was caught, I'm sorry, accused of contacting a minor and engaging in lewd acts. And so a pediatrician who lives in our neighborhood told me that because of COVID, there may be a chance that what's happening on the local law enforcement level may not reach the state medical board, and there may be a lapse where the state medical board may not investigate this on their end. So on behalf of the community, I filed a letter and I received a response. So shortly after this, I filed a complaint online on behalf of the association, asking that they follow the case and follow the outcome. And if it's adjudicated and this pediatrician has been found to be guilty of these crimes, that they look into his medical license. Many of our children in our neighborhood go to Stanford. They are affiliated with their health insurance with a doctor from Stanford. And so this was recommended. And so I followed through, and they were very specific, and they have opened up an investigation. And we're basically removed at this point, other than receiving status updates, but they will be following the case to follow through to ensure that the two are going hand in hand. So that was something that we pursued since we last met. And we mentioned earlier about the Magical Bridge playground, and let's see where we've got that here. Let me move this out of the way. Okay, so we put a request in. Actually, our request isn't, we are basically obtaining information from the community to gather support so we can present this to the city. It is what we talked with Briana about earlier, and it's about providing safe, equitable access to the Magical Bridge playground. This is a petition going right now on behalf of the neighborhood association. We have, when I signed on to the meeting, we have 231 people who've signed on, and we put this up yesterday. So we've got some really good feedback on it, and we will keep this going probably for the next 2 weeks, and then we will prepare a summary of the comments, and we'll present it to council, and we'll send a copy to Jessica Manzi so she can look into alternatives and what might be available to us as far as providing access there. Let me stop sharing my screen. Thank you for bearing with me through all of that. So that's all of the association announcements. I was hoping that we could share with one another what's going on with vaccine information. I know it's been sort of scattered and a little bit confusing. When I was at Rite Aid last week at Woodside Plaza, they said they were getting to tier 1C, and that although it looked like you couldn't make an appointment online, you actually, if you clicked through, the appointments were available and you could book them. So if we could maybe share with one another any vaccine information you have you been successful in booking an appointment, and how, that would be very helpful. Jerry.
I was able to do it through Kaiser, but I'm of an age that allows me to make an appointment, but it took a little bit of doing to actually get it, plus a wait. And a lot of other friends of ours that would be eligible for it have not been able to get it until recently. I think things are opening up a little bit.
Go ahead, Regina. I'm sorry, I didn't unmute myself.
That's okay. I got my second shot today at Kaiser.
That's great news. I'm so happy. So it sounds like Kaiser is on top of it.
We're ramping up. I was in and out in 15 minutes. I mean, I walked in, got the shot, sat for 15 minutes, and was out before my appointment even was due. And it was getting onto their website, and they have one side that says, do you want a test or do you want a vaccination? And every day once I went on a vaccination, and within 2 days I had one for the first shot. So I was really pleased, because I'm at a certain age like Jerry, we need it.
That's great. I'm so happy to hear that. So Kaiser is a good resource. Leslie.
No, not necessarily. I mean, you really have to keep
well, I've got Kaiser too, so I know it's a struggle, but I'm glad they're offering it.
Thank you.
Leslie.
I had a hard time scheduling a vaccine for my mom because she's a PAMF patient, and Sutter Health wasn't getting their vaccine. So I spent about a week trying to schedule a vaccine for her before I remembered that she's also a patient at Stanford. And Stanford is offering appointments at their facilities on Broadway to anyone. You don't even have to be a Stanford patient. So it's really easy to make an appointment either through the app or online.
That's fantastic. That's great news. Does anybody else want to share any information about another available opportunity to get the vaccine, or any tips on how you maneuvered the system to actually get on the list to get the vaccine? Gail.
So I actually had two friends who heard about how to get vaccinated through Nextdoor. So I think what happens is there's like last minute cancellations, or there's no shows, and all of a sudden there's space. So yeah, I don't know if people have also read that on Nextdoor, but I was surprised to hear it.
That's great news. That's great news. I know my neighbor came over today, and he has some significant issues. And he said to me that he's on the list with the pharmacy. And if they have extra at the end of the day and they have to be used, there's like a list of people and he meets that qualification, but he doesn't have an appointment yet. So I think that people are really trying to be creative, and I'm glad to see, as of late, Nextdoor has really been a good, information. Sometimes it goes off the rails, but lately it's been pretty good. So so that's great. Does anybody else want to share? And it's open forum. I have one more announcement, but I'll keep that till the end. So open forum is basically anything that's on your mind, something that's come up, something that's going on that you'd like to bring to our attention, or anything at all. Anybody got anything to share? Regina.
Yes, I can inform you now that most of the activities for the summer in Redwood City are probably going to be canceled. I had interaction with Chris Beth, and the 4th of July is once again being canceled. And it seems like most activities in other cities will be doing the same. I feel that it's better to be safe than to be sorry. With any of the activities downtown, you cannot keep people apart. And why take the chance after being locked down for a whole year already, just because you want to have fun in the summertime? I don't get it when people say that.
I agree. And I know you put a lot of work year after year into the parade and all the services down there. We appreciate that. But absolutely, the last thing we need is to all gather tightly downtown. Yeah. And risk another spike.
So I'm waiting for the city to give us some wording, because last year we got a lot of nasty feedback from people of how dare we cancel and take away all the fun. So now I'm waiting for wording from the city, so we can use the same wording for when they do their announcement. Chris apparently has talked to every city up and down the peninsula, and there's nothing happening. Even if anything would improve, we couldn't allow more than 50 to 100 people at the same time. That doesn't make any sense. To take the risk after all of the time that we have spent trying to not get it, to then put ourselves out there, oh yeah, well, just let's have some fun, it's summer.
Yeah, and how could you monitor the number of people? I mean, how could you? I
think if it comes from the city, it makes it a lot safer. Okay, the city says there's no fireworks, there's no parade, there's no nothing. Live with it. Mm-hmm. Don't blame me for the cancellation.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that news. I mean, it's sad, but it's what has to be done. It's just at this point, that's where we are, and we're all lucky to still be with one another, right? So that's a blessing. We have to take every blessing as it comes. So Jennifer. And after Jennifer, Jerry.
Hi there. I just wanted to introduce myself. My name's Jennifer Tipton, and I'm a Farm Hill resident. And I'm also one of your Parks, Recreation, and Community Services commissioners. So if you ever have any concerns or suggestions or anything, I'm with you all. I am more than happy to take that to the department or maybe see if I can answer your questions myself. So I just want to let you know that I'm here for all of you. And you're all welcome anytime to attend one of our meetings. We meet at on Wednesday, the fourth Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. So our next meeting is the 24th of March. And that's a public meeting. Anyone can come with any concerns. Joanna, I just had a quick question about the Magical Bridge traffic. Because I wasn't, this is my first community meeting. At our last commission meeting, we did discuss the possibility of putting in a traffic circle at Vera and Volota Road to slow down the traffic. I don't know if that helps at all with your, no, okay. So, yeah.
That intersection is already dangerous. There used to be like a mirror like they use at like Burger King when you're in the drive-through to see old days when you could see how many cars are backed up. That's a really dangerous intersection and the road is narrow. I don't know. I think what I would like to see personally, what's on the petition, is a lighted crosswalk similar to the one we had at the post office, the one that's in front of the Kaiser Cypress building. So when you push the button, all the lights go off so people can see it day or night.
Right.
And at a minimum, we can get those. If we can get them installed at the post office and we can get them installed at Kaiser, we can get them at that intersection and at least raise awareness that, wait, slow down. This is a serious intersection. I mean, I have a bunch of pictures I took from Google. And just when the Google car drove by, you should see the traffic. Just when you search that intersection, just what Google had. So there's traffic all the time. Okay, so Jerry is next and then Gerd. Thank you, Jennifer.
Couple of questions. Jennifer, you'd mentioned Volota. I didn't catch what intersection that was. Maybe you can mention that again. I'm just curious because Volota is a very busy street.
Vera.
And
Vera
I
and
don't know
Volota.
what street, what cross section, what cross street was that?
It's the idea is that the long-term solution, and this is what we talked about, would be to create a traffic circle at Vera Avenue and Volota Road.
Okay, I'll have to give that some thought. The traffic circles are sometimes not the best idea. There's one.
No, this would be a real roundabout. Just to be correct, this would be a roundabout, not a traffic circle.
But I'm sorry, I meant roundabout. We've got one around the corner from us, and Johanna, right down the corner here, that's absolutely worthless. It was put in there a long time ago, and the reason it was put in no longer exists. But anyway, my questions, does anybody know anything about when the YMCA might open? My wife wants to get back in the pool there. I see Barbara Pierce is not online right now. She was earlier. And also a friend of mine asked if there's any chance for the concerts in the park to happen. And I don't think that's going to happen this year.
No. I think the traffic situation is the worst on Jefferson and Volota. You need to get a light crossing there because there are a lot of seniors going over there to the senior center and you can't go fast now. The street is not total level, so you have the higher area and the lower area, and they don't make it across the street. There used to be a walking group from the rec department. You could never make it across the street without, having to look sideways so many times. I think because Jefferson is such a busy street to begin with, that's where we should concentrate on.
Don't most people cross at John Gill at that light that they have there that intermittent light?
No, we've got the entire Eagle Hill that comes over. That's who actually brought it to my attention, because they don't have an active neighborhood association. They have a daycare center and a lot of children. And they're like, we have to cross that street. We on our side, we cross, we can cross on our side, cross Alameda and then cross down. But for the folks who literally, the neighborhoods that are north, they have to cross. And then remember, this is a playground for children who have, it's inclusive of children who have disabilities, wheelchairs. So the whole nature of that whole park is for people of all abilities. We've got the senior center. We need some time to cross the street safely.
There are only two safe ways, exactly. One is the John Gill, and the other one is all the way up on Alameda, and between there's nothing.
Yep.
Except speeding cars.
Yeah, and we don't even have patrols anymore. There used to always be patrols, but that's a thing of the past. So, Jerry, did that answer your question? Maybe Amanda can answer the other question you had about the senior center. It was my understanding it was kind of on hold right now. And I'm sorry, Barbara didn't stay with us, because she would have been a good person to ask about that. Amanda,
Yeah, the YMCA, not the senior
yes,
center.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Yes.
That's been closed since March.
Sorry, there's a lot going on in my house right now. Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, I missed it.
Jerry, do you want to ask her? So the question was, what's going on with the YMCA, as far as we were talking about the Volota and Jefferson, and then what the status of the YMCA situation is there? And am I asking the question right, Jerry?
Yeah,
okay.
My wife was very curious about the YMCA on Hudson, whether that will open again at all, because it's been closed since March. And she'd love to use the pool there, and there's no word about anything going on there. And some of the other Ys are open in other areas.
Right. I cannot speak to that, only because literally I don't know. The last I know about that, they were in negotiations. So I unfortunately cannot speak to that. And all of that was happening right before the pandemic. So it might still be closed just because of the pandemic. But again, yeah. I don't know. And I don't want to say something because obviously I don't know. Sorry.
Gerd, did you have another question?
So I just, what we were talking earlier with the crossing. So there's the Jefferson Valota crossing from the Eagle Hill neighborhood or Carmel. There is the Vera and Valota that should be a roundabout, and the roundabout hopefully comes, or from the plans I have seen, comes with better pedestrian crossing, because right now that crossing is dangerous because of that curve, right? There's no visibility.
That's true.
Cars come around. Having something there, either a better pedestrian crossing with a traffic light or that roundabout would be really helpful. There is a Vera, something that's called Bicycle Boulevard, which is more like a residential greenway. I think that's the expression, which has a lot of pedestrian improvement. Nothing for bicycles really. It's mostly pedestrians improvement along Vera. But that would be really helpful from all the way up at Roosevelt School down to downtown, right, to El Camino. That is in the works for quite a while, but nothing ever happens. And then there is something going on Roosevelt Avenue, which is supposed to be getting traffic calming. A lot of improvements, I think, for pedestrians, but unfortunately, again, nothing for bicycles, which is a problem for the kids living in these high-density neighborhoods around Horse, because that school is closed and all these kids have to come from, North Palm and South Palm neighborhoods, they have to come all the way up to Henry Ford, Roosevelt, and Kennedy School. That's just how the boundaries are now. And there is no safe travel right now. Not on Vera, not on Roosevelt, not on Redwood. All these they get pedestrian improvements, but they don't get bicycle improvements. But these schools are 1.5, 2 miles away, so walking just doesn't work anymore. You have to have bicycle improvements there.
Henry Ford is fenced in too. Henry Ford School is fenced in.
And my fear is they don't open up again.
Right.
Not before COVID, not after COVID. The reason is once these schools close, they stay closed. Because then nobody has to clean up. It's just cheaper this way.
Well, hopefully we can work together and stay on top of that. I think our kids' safety has got to be, it's our top priority. And so these are all things that we're going to be actively working on. And I'm so grateful to have everybody.
And thank you for doing that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm thankful to have the expertise of the group. Everybody has their own little pocket of knowledge and expertise, and that makes us a group that can get things done. So I see that we're at time. I want to try and share one more thing before we go, because I'm really excited about it. Let's see here. Can you see my screen? So I spent the last week building this website for our neighborhood. And so we have our official Farm Hill neighborhood website. And so on here, you can see we have a blog, we have our meetings. This one will be posted there, a little bit about what's the difference between a neighborhood association. We have about like what we do here. Let's see if okay. So what we're about, what our purpose is, who we are, about our membership. We have our current projects, what we're working on, how you can sign our petition, all of our meeting information. So it's all here. So this is where I'm going to be posting the information and sharing, and I'm really excited about it. And if you could share this, the links are in the chat. I would greatly appreciate it. And so I think that's a wrap for tonight. Oh, I'm sorry. There's one thing I forgot to mention is there's going to be a State of the City on March 15th, and the link will be in the chat. We're going to talk about COVID, talk about the state of our city. So that's going to be an important meeting if you can attend. So this is our new spot. We're also on Facebook. We're also on Nextdoor, but I'm hoping that we can communicate on the website. As always, I'm so grateful to each and every one of you for being here. And oh, Regina.
Is there another Farm Hill group up near Edenbauer and Silver Hill?
It's one group. So we are Farm Hill. So the city defines our boundaries. So on Nextdoor, we're east and west, but in real life, we're just Farm Hill.
Okay, but there has been communication from somebody else up there. I'll save the letter the next time.
Okay, so yeah, maybe you could get that to me. Okay.
Yes, somebody got the letter on Silver Hill and it had nothing to do with our group.
Oh, I think it might, is it our friendly realtor? Maybe it was our friendly realtor.
It didn't have a name on it. That was the funny thing.
Okay, well, we'll find out.
Yeah.
We'll do a little investigation work on that one. Okay, I know someone who might know a little bit about investigating.
Oh, yeah, I know which one.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks so much, everybody. I did get a request from Keith Blakey. He asked if we could maybe meet next time on a Friday instead of a Thursday, just for one time, because he does Boy Scouts and he always misses. So if it's okay with everyone, we'll just schedule our next meeting for the Friday versus the Thursday so we can include him. Is that okay? All right, I'll get that information out. Have a great night. So glad we had 24 participants at the height of our meeting. So most we've had in a long time. Great to see everybody.
Great job.
All right, take care. Good night.
Awesome, thanks.
You're welcome. Good night.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good night.